You don't actually need to buy fertilizer to grow food, and most people waste years not realizing that everything required to feed plants properly is already being thrown away in their own home. The assumption is that soil needs products, needs bags, needs trips to the store. That's not how this works. What soil actually needs is a system that returns nutrients to it the same way forests have been feeding themselves for thousands of years without a single purchase. This isn't about complicated composting setups or waiting months for something to break down. This is about understanding that your kitchen scraps, your yard waste, and even your own daily habits are producing fertilizer constantly, and all you're doing right now is throwing it away. Once you see how this connects, you'll never look at a banana peel or a bag of grass clippings the same way again. The moment you stop depending on fertilizer is the moment you start depending on a process that costs nothing and runs itself. Let me walk you through how this actually works in a backyard, because the method itself is simpler than most people expect. You start with the scraps. Every kitchen produces them. Vegetable peels, coffee grounds, eggshells, fruit rinds, even the wilted lettuce you didn't get around to eating. These aren't trash. They're nitrogen, calcium, potassium, and trace minerals in a form that soil biology can actually use. Instead of bagging them up and setting them on the curb, you're going to place them directly into your growing beds, and you're going to let the soil handle the breakdown. No bin required, no turning. No waiting for a pile to cure. You bury them shallow, maybe 3 or 4 inches down, right next to where your plants are growing or where you plan to plant in a few weeks. The worms, the bacteria, the fungi, they all show up on their own. That's their job. They eat the scraps, and what they leave behind is fertilizer in the most efficient form your plants will ever get. Now let's talk about grass clippings, because most people either bag them or hire someone to haul them off, and that's a loss they don't even calculate. Every time you mow, you're removing nitrogen from your property. Grass is one of the fastest nitrogen accumulators you'll find. When you cut it and leave it on the lawn, it breaks down in days. When you collect it and spread it thin around your vegetable plants, it does the same thing, except now it's feeding your tomatoes, your squash, your beans. You don't need to compost it first. You lay it down as mulch, maybe an inch or two thick, and it starts breaking down immediately. As it does, it releases nitrogen right into the root zone. In my experience, most people fail with fertilizer-free growing not because their soil is bad, but because they assume that feeding plants is about adding something from outside the system. It's not. It's about cycling what's already there. Leaves are another resource people treat like waste. Every fall, bags and bags of leaves go to the curb. Those leaves are carbon. That's the other half of the equation. Nitrogen alone burns out. Carbon alone takes forever to break down. When you layer them together, grass clippings under leaves, kitchen scraps under wood chips, you're building what's called a carbon to nitrogen ratio. And that ratio is what allows decomposition to happen at the speed your garden needs. You don't have to measure it. You don't need to test it. You just alternate. A layer of green, a layer of brown. Soft materials, woody materials, wet, dry. The soil organisms figure out the rest. This is how forests build topsoil. This is how prairies stayed fertile before humans ever touched them. You're not inventing a new system. You're just plugging back into one that already works. Now let's go deeper, because there's a component most beginners never think about, and it's one of the most powerful. Your own urine is a complete liquid fertilizer. It contains nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in ratios that plants actually use. It's sterile when it leaves your body. It's free. It's produced daily. And almost everyone flushes it away without a second thought. If you dilute it, about 10 parts rainwater to 1 part urine, you can pour it directly onto your soil or around the base of your plants, and they'll respond faster than they would to almost anything you could buy. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm saying it's an option that exists, and it's one that people who grow food seriously in other parts of the world have used for centuries. It works. It's immediate, and it closes a loop that most people don't even realize is open. Then there's wood ash, if you burn wood. It's potassium and calcium. A light dusting over your beds once or twice a year is enough. You don't need much. Too much will raise your pH too high. But a little goes a long way, especially for fruiting crops. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, anything that flowers and sets fruit. They pull potassium hard. Wood ash gives that back. Eggshells give calcium. You can crush them and mix them into the soil, or you can throw them in whole and let time do the work. Calcium prevents blossom end rot in tomatoes. It strengthens cell walls. It's in every egg you crack. You're already producing it. What I'm describing here isn't a recipe, it's a practice. Once you understand that feeding your soil is just about returning to it what came from it, the entire system simplifies. You stop thinking in terms of products and start thinking in terms of cycles. Your kitchen feeds your garden feeds you. What you don't eat goes back into the soil grows more food. It's a loop. The only reason it feels complicated is because we've been taught to interrupt that loop and replace it with purchases. You don't have to. You can step back into the cycle right now with what you already have. There's one more layer to this that makes it even easier over time, and that's planting things that fix nitrogen on their own. Beans, peas, clover, vetch. These plants pull nitrogen out of the air and store it in nodules on their roots. When the plant dies, or when you cut it back, that nitrogen gets released into the soil. You're not adding it. The plant is. If you grow beans in the summer and then cut the plants down at the end of the season and leave the roots in the ground, the next crop you plant in that spot will have nitrogen waiting for it. If you plant clover as a cover crop in the fall and then turn it under in the spring, you've just fertilized that bed without spending a cent. This is how farmers used to maintain fertility before synthetic nitrogen existed. It still works. It works better, actually, because it builds soil structure at the same time. Something else people overlook is weeds. Not all of them, but many common weeds are what's called dynamic accumulators. They pull minerals up from deep in the subsoil where your vegetables can't reach, and they store those minerals in their leaves. Dandelions pull up calcium. Nettles bring up iron and nitrogen. Comfrey is one of the most efficient potassium accumulators you'll ever find. If you cut these plants before they seed and lay them on the soil surface or bury them shallow, you're mining your own subsoil for free. You're bringing nutrients up from below and making them available to the plants you actually want to grow. This is fertilizer you didn't plant on purpose, and it's working for you anyway. Now here's something most people never consider. The water you use to boil vegetables, to steam broccoli, to cook pasta, that water is full of nutrients that leached out during cooking. Instead of pouring it down the drain, let it cool completely and pour it onto your garden beds. You're returning phosphorus, potassium, and trace elements that came from the food itself. The same goes for water from rinsing rice or soaking beans. It all has value. It all feeds the soil. You're not creating extra work. You're just redirecting something that was going to waste anyway. These small habits add up over months and years into soil that doesn't need anything else. There's also something to be said for cardboard and newspaper. Both break down into carbon, and both smother weeds while they do it. If you lay cardboard over a section of lawn you want to convert into garden space, wet it down and cover it with a few inches of leaves or wood chips. Within a few months, the grass underneath is dead, and the cardboard has started to decompose. You've just created a planting bed, without tilling, without chemicals, and without buying soil. The worms move in. The fungi colonize it. By the time you're ready to plant, the structure is there. I want to be clear about what this approach gives you over time. In the first year, you're learning the rhythm. You're seeing what breaks down fast, what takes longer, how much your plants actually need. By the second year, your soil is noticeably darker, looser, easier to work. Your plants grow faster. They're healthier. You're not buying bottles or bags. You're not measuring or mixing. You're just returning scraps, layering mulch, and watching the system run itself. By the third year, the difference is dramatic. Your soil holds water better, it drains better, it grows food with less effort because the biology is established, and none of that required a product. It required a decision to stop removing resources from your property and start cycling them instead. This is food security that doesn't depend on supply chains, price increases, or availability. It depends on process, on biology, on the fact that decomposition happens whether you manage it or not, and all you're doing is aiming it toward your garden instead of the landfill. That's the shift. That's the only thing you need to change. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every scrap becomes valuable. Every mowing becomes an opportunity. You start to realize that the wealthiest soil on your property isn't something you buy. It's something you build. Slowly, consistently, by feeding it what it's designed to eat. And that soil will feed you, year after year, long after the last bag of fertilizer runs out.